enough of our chit chat. I do want to say thank you to our sponsor, Suzuki Marine. Um, you have a couple of Suzukis, don't you?
I have, at the moment, I have 3.
Awesome.
I have had others through the years.
And you've had them for years. You didn't get them as a part of this.
Oh, the ones on my boat right now have like 3,000 plus hours on them, and they're over 10 years old. And they're like a charm, knock on wood.
Well, I hope everyone stuck with us. Apologize for the blip. Anyway, Lenny, let's get this party started, all right?
All right, let's start talking flounder.
Okay.
Folks, the good news is when that has happened in the past, it happened one time before, it didn't happen again the same night. So hopefully it won't happen again. So look, everybody's kind of bummed out that here it is April and we can't go fishing for rockfish, right? That's kind of a bummer. I don't care if you live in Maryland, you live in Virginia, wherever you are, it just kind of stinks. Okay, but guess what? There's a great fishery that's going off. In addition to the shad fishery I was mentioning earlier, but down at the beach, the flounder have started. And, going back through the years, I've got some friends who, when trophy rockfish season came around, they didn't even fish for rockfish. They were like, why join that madhouse? I'll give that time to calm down. I'm going to go flounder fishing, because April is actually a phenomenal year for it. I'm sorry, a phenomenal month for it. The springtime bite is a great bite. And there's usually not a heck of a lot of competition out there yet. So, Chris, let's go ahead and start rolling through these slides. Pop up number 1, please. This is behind Assateague Island off the airport. Many people know that that's generally a good zone. You can drift the channel back there, catch plenty of flounder. This one got the Suzuki's in there, so I popped the slide in. But let's go to the next slide, because that's the first one that has real fishing importance. This is my lovely wife, Melissa, holding up a nice little flounder she caught. And you can see that the fish ate your standard fluke killer rig. This is just a leader with a bucktail hair on the end, a spinner, and some beads in front of the hook. That's it. It's sort of the classic flounder rig. It worked great 20 years ago. It works great today. You can bait it with a minnow, you can bait it with a squid strip, or you can bait it with what they call the sandwich. And that is a strip of squid and a minnow. I like to put on the strip of squid first, then put on the minnow with a hook in through the bottom lip, out through the top. And you just drag this along the bottom. Critical feature if you're using this rig. When a flounder grabs it, you'll feel a tap, tap, tap. Don't set the hook. If you do, you'll miss the fish every dang time. You got to wait for a thump, 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 right? First you feel the tap, tap, tap. Then you feel thump, thump, thump. When you feel the thump, 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 that's the fish actually swimming away. That means it's grabbed the bait and then inhaled it all the way in. So when you feel that thump, 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 then is when you want to set the hook. All right, Chris, go ahead and take us to the next slide if you would. So here is a different kind of a similar rig. This is not actually a spinning glow. The spinning glows have little fins on that green piece that make it spin. But my point of putting this up was there are all kinds of similar rigs like this that are very similar to the traditional fluke killer. In my experience, they all work about as good. The spinning glow works good. These guys here work good. There are 1,000,001 of these different rigs out there. You can find them with all different kinds of teasers. They all operate about the same. They all operate like the fluke killer. You bait them the same. You put on your sandwich. You drag it along the bottom. Tap, tap, tap. Don't set the hook. Thump, thump, thump. Set the hook. They all work pretty darn good. Chris, go ahead and take us to the next slide. And while you're doing that, I'm going to mention, folks, as you have questions, feel free to pop them into the comments. Chris will relay them and put them up on screen. I forgot to mention that earlier. Sorry about that. Now here, if you look at what's hanging out of that flounder's mouth, you see a straight-tailed plastic jig. This is how I like to fish for flounder. You don't have to use bait to catch flounder. In fact, I would argue that in certain cases, with certain jigs, you can be more effective than you would be using that classic rig. And the truth of the matter is, in recent years, jigging for the flounder has become more and more popular. You can see this is a white. At different times, they'll hit all different colors. Chris, go ahead and slide us to the next one there, would you please? Here you see another one. This one actually I think is a bass assassin. It's a speckled green, white, green, pink, yellow, your standard colors. All are going to work good. what you want to do is let this jig down to the bottom and then just jig it straight up really fast. Fast jig up and let it sink down till it hits. Wait for it to hit bottom before you jig it back up again. Usually, when a flounder strikes a jig worked in that fashion, you're not even going to realize it because he strikes right before it hits the bottom. You go up to do your jig and you feel weight. It's a de facto hook set because as you're jigging up quickly, you're going to feel the resistance. You're going to get right into the hook set. Rare occasions, it'll stop falling halfway down and you'll know that you've been hit. You want to set the hook. But usually it's right down at the bottom. It's a real surprise. It's a great surprise because you go to just do a regular jig and whoa, 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 something's there. When you get a really big flounder on, it's going to feel like you hook bottom. It's simple as that. It just feels like you hooked into the bottom as you come up. And then you feel that big head shake and the fight is on. Chris, go ahead and take me to the next one, please. Now here you are going to see, that is my very favorite. That is a 5-inch gulp jerk shad, straight tail jig. If you fish the offshore wrecks and reefs, most people really, really like, and I really, really like, the gulp swimming mullet, which is a twister tail. You put that on a fluke killer rig and then drag it along. And I got to admit, on the offshore wrecks and reefs, that is more effective than these straight tails. But when you're in the coastal bay or in the Chesapeake, I really think that the straight tail is the most effective way to go, particularly if you're vertically jigging over a channel edge. In that scenario, that straight tail is going to get hit more often than anything. And you should notice these slides I've been putting up, none of these have a paddle tail and none of these have twister tails. And I have literally fished side by side with folks where the straight tail jig catches over and over again and the twister tail or the paddle tail gets ignored. And I think a big part of that is, particularly on a vertical jig, the paddle tails and the twister tails tend to sink in a spiral. For whatever reason, the flounder don't really seem to like that. If you're just going along straight, right, if you're drifting along a wreck, the twister tail's great. Don't get me wrong. But going up and down, it needs that straight tail to get that action like this as it falls, as opposed to that spiral. They just don't seem to like that spiral. I like these gulp shad the most in white and chartreuse, and I always carry them on my boat, no matter what. I've always got a couple packs of them on my boat. And if I want to target flounder in specific, that is absolutely, positively going to be my go-to bait. All right, Chris, would you go ahead and take us to the next slide, please? This here is a slide of Watchaprig. If you go to fishtalkmag.com and just type flounder into the search box, you'll find the article Watchaprig. I think it's Watchaprig Flatfish Wonderland or something like that. I pulled the slide from that. It goes into detail fishing Watchaprig itself. Watchaprig, of course, is sort of the most famous spring flounder spot. Tons of people go down there. You go there any other time of year, and it's shocking if there are 3 boats using the ramp. You go there during flounder season, and it is a madhouse. It's kind of cool. And what you see here, the red line is showing you the route you're going to take to get out to number 3 there, which is probably the most popular spot. We're going to talk about that in detail in just a second. But numbers 1 and 2 are also good spots to try. And the critical thing I want to talk about here is the difference in fishing Watchaprig, and this also goes for any of the coastal bays, okay? Ocean City, Chincoteague, and by the way, they're in Ocean City right now. They're being caught in Ocean City right now. Ocean City is underrated. Watchaprig kind of gets all the attention. And maybe it's a little better than OC, but the back bay behind OC in the springtime is way better flounder fishing than it is during the summer. It's definitely an underrated fishery. But the critical thing here I want to mention is on a low tide and a falling tide, you're going to catch most of your fish on the channel edges, right? And if you look at number 2 and number 3, you can see there's a winding channel going between them. The water's like a couple feet deep on the edges, and then it drops off. Real sheer drop, goes down to 20, 30 feet in a lot of spots. Most people set up for a drift, and they just drift down that channel, and they don't catch a lot of fish. The thing you got to remember is the flounder are on the edges, even when they're sitting deep. they're going to be on the edge. They're not going to be sitting in the middle of the channel out there. When you drift down an edge and you catch a fish, and then your boat passes over the middle of the channel, just keeps going down the middle of the channel, you're not going to catch any more fish. You got to immediately get back up on the edge. And I'll see, sometimes you'll see folks out there, they'll do, a 15-minute drift just going right down the middle of the channel, and they wonder why not catch a fish. And that's going to be a major reason why. You got to get up on that edge. And if you blow off of it in a minute, guess what? Pain in the butt. You got to reel up, reposition, and get right back on that edge. Drift that edge again. Even if half the time you're spending is repositioning the boat, that's okay. Because if you keep your baits right on those edges, that's when you're going to catch your fish. Now, again, that's low tide and a strong falling tide. When you have the end of an incoming and a high tide, you want to get up in the shallows. And it's really fun to fish for the flounder in the shallows. Now, obviously, you're not going to vertically jig. You're going to transition to casting and retrieving. You're going to want to throw out and then bounce that jig over the bottom as you bring it back. In areas like Wachapreague, there are a lot of oyster shell bottoms. You'll get snagged. You're going to lose jigs. Bring extra jigs. You will get snagged. Just laugh it off. Smile about it. I lost another one. Oh, well. Okay? It's part of the game. You just have to accept the fact that you will be losing some tackle when you're fishing those shallows. There are sticks. You'll see white sticks up that mark oyster bar. Pay attention to those, because even though you will lose more jigs when you throw up near those oyster bars, you'll catch a lot of flounder right around their edges. The flounder move up to the edge of those bars to feed on that high tide. As soon as it switches and you start to get just the very beginning of the falling tide, look for creek mouths that are draining the marsh islands. You can see, if you look between 3 and 1, there are 2 big marsh islands, right? Anywhere you find a creek that's draining off a marsh island, what happens is, on the flood, those creeks are hit by the sun, right? And they warm up. And when the tide changes and they start to drain out, they might be 2-3 degrees warmer than the surrounding waters. The flounder like that, they're going to go right to those creek mouths. They're going to sit there and they're going to wait for bait fish to get flushed out of the creek while they sit there and enjoy their nice warm bath. So look for those creek mouths. As soon as that tide starts falling, hit them. You'll usually find that somewhere around midway through the tide, if you find a good bite at those creek mouths, somewhere around midway through the tide, that bite peters out, and that's when you know it's time to go and start hitting those channel edges. The fish have moved deeper. They're kind of done with the shallows, and it's time to shift gears and transition. All right, Chris, go ahead and take us to the next one if you would.
Hey, Lenny, actually, I got a question for you.
Pitch it up. What do you got?
So one of our watchers right now is asking about kayak fishing spots, and I'm not real familiar with Wachapreague, but just from the map there, it looks like that might be a nice place to be in a kayak.
It'd be a very cool place to kayak. Now, the spots that we're talking about right here are pretty far paddle. You're talking miles, not yards.
All right.
I don't know exactly how many. I would go to Google Earth and measure it, and of course, every kayaker kind of has their own limitations. But I would also say, you don't necessarily have to go to those spots. There are tons of creeks and cuts running through these marshes that you can absolutely have good luck in, and they're probably prime for kayakers, particularly on a high tide, because a lot of boats probably just can't get to them. There's a lot of shallows. I always tell people when I go to Wachapreague, I always tell whoever's in my boat, I'm like, hey, we're going to run aground today. All right. It's a given. Like, don't worry about it. Don't freak out. It happens. We're going to run aground today. And without fail, I always run aground at least once. But there's a lot of shallows that are tough to get through. And so a kayak would have a distinct advantage in some ways. I would study Google Earth. I'd look for some of these creeks and cuts, particularly if you could find areas where it's too shallow for a boat to run to, but you can get in there, and then you have some deeper water where the cuts come out. A lot of times there's a little scour there where they come out. Might only be a foot of water around there, but it's 3 feet in that little scour. That is, just a totally prime spot to hit. Also, again, don't sell OC short. Ocean City has good flounder fishing, and there are a million places that you could put in the kayak there and try. Chincoteague is the same. Quimby is the same. All these coastal bays offer just tons of opportunity. Now, all of that said, of course, I'm not a kayak sharpie. Our kayak sharpie is Zach Ditmars. If he wants to chime in, Zach, man, plug in a comment and we'll read it off.
Yeah. And just before we go to the next slide, Chris Sanders is wondering how you would actually do this type of fishing from the shore.
So shore is tough. You're not going to be able to hit these spots from shore. What you can do from shore is you can do like the Route 50 bridge in Ocean City, classic flounder spot. Most people think of it as a summer spot, but it's not just summertime. Springtime, you get the flounder. So I'd go to the Route 50 bridge in OC would be if I was going to go fishing tomorrow for flounder and I didn't have a boat, that's the first spot I'd try. The bulkhead along, I think it's from the bridge to like 9th Street. There's public area there, and then there's a public fishing pier at 9th Street. Those are all potential locations. You're not going to get the shallow water spots there. Okay, so I would time that for a low tide. Fishing the Route 50 bridge, you can fish on a low tide. As you walk along that bridge, you can hit everything. You can hit the channel, you can hit the deep spots, you can hit the shoals. There's some shoals there where bars are built up and it's like 8 inches of water, right under the bridge, way out in the middle. It looks like there should be plenty of water, but there's shoals there. Let me think. Other spots you could do from shore. I'm not sure that Wachapreak really has any. I don't know offhand about Chincoteague or Quimby. I would want to look into it a little further. But the Route 50 bridge is definitely a prime spot for that.
Cool. And again, before we go, Kevin wants to know where you launch.
There are a couple public launch spots there. You can launch at the tackle shop, Zed's. You can launch there. There's also a town ramp that you can launch at. There are several spots. It's not hard to find there. In fact, Kevin, I know that you have fished on the Heat Wave, and there is a launch ramp right on the other side of the building right there by the restaurant where the Heat Wave is kept. And that's all fair game. It's all, I think you might have to go into the tackle shop and pay like $5 or something. It's not a big deal.
All right, let's move on.
Okay. Here we have a blow up of what was number 3 in that last slide. The light blue indicates channel, and the dark blue indicates really, really deep channel. We're talking, 8 foot versus 35 feet. And we talk about this in the article. It's kind of hard with just a graphic, but the arrows are pointing to the different zones you might want to try, and the white arrows to the left are pointing to shallow water zones, right? So you go there on your high tide. Maybe work that light blue channel a little bit after the tide begins to fall and you're heading for the deeper water. And the arrow pointing down in the center, you can just see there's a little island right next to the channel there. That's a good spot. I've caught fish there in the shallows right at the beginning of a falling tide when the water's still high. You still got high water on the shoals, but you know that the fish are getting ready to transition to the deep water. That's a really good spot. And then the white arrow bottom right is pointing back towards the main channel zones. That's where you're moving when you're lower tides, is that water, you're starting to lose your depth. The area that you were fishing that was 2-3 feet is now like, whoops, I'm bumping bottom with my out drive. Time to move out. Like I said, you're going to run aground. Plan on it. And then when you get to that really low water, that's where you're going to transition to that really deep channel. But again, I want to stress, looking at it on a Google Earth picture like this, it's kind of hard to visualize the distance between that little island and the shore. It's not very big. If you have a 12, 15 knot breeze, you're going to blow from one side to the other really quickly. A minute, 2 minutes, something like that. You don't have a lot of time. And the key factor there is, as soon as you reach the middle of the channel, if you're not immediately going back up the other side and you're just going to drift down that channel, get right back up on that edge. Do not waste your time drifting down a steady depth. If you look at your meter and it's 30, 31, 30, 31, you're basically wasting your time. That's just not where you're going to catch your fish. Get back up on that edge. You want to see constant changes, constant drops. And you'll find the flounder. Sometimes you'll find them all the way down at 30 feet. More often you'll find them 24, 26, all the way up to the top of the drop. And the flounder do tend to hang in the same depth zones. When you catch one in 15 feet, you're likely to catch more in 15 feet until the tide changes. As the tide changes, that'll change. But for a limited period of time, 15 feet is likely to remain kind of the hot zone. So you want to focus on that depth zone. Get right back up there. Do it again. All right, take me to the next one, Chris. Oh, wait. Do we have Zach? I can see a Zach. I can't quite make it out.
Zach chimed in and let Ian know that Ocean City is probably better. He was Washapreag is a lot of water to cover in a kayak.
Okay, yeah, you know, he's talking Stinky Beach where he mentions.
Yep.
That would be a great spot to start at, because you got right there. You've got the channel that goes into the Ocean City Fishing Center, and then you've got a shoal on the other side of that. If you continue up that channel, you get up to the bridge. You can pass under the bridge and work the channel on the other side. There's a lot of different varying depths right off of Stinky Beach right there. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Zach?
Yeah, thanks, Zach. Fred wants to know whether or not his title license will work on coastal bays.
Yeah, you're fine. You don't need a separate license for this.
Sweet.
You have to have the I forget what they call it. There's the Federal Registry or whatever. But when you get your Maryland title license, that puts you in that, so you're all set.
Cool. And Barry wants to know how far north you can go here.
How far north keepers go? Okay, so now we're up in the Chesapeake as opposed to the coastal bays.
Right.
And yes, we used to have great flounder fishing at Thomas Point, Eastern Bay. You know, it hasn't happened. Gosh, 8-10 years. That's a big question mark. You know, that's a big question mark. At the same time, the flounder fishing hasn't been as good kind of throughout the main stem Chesapeake until you got to the very mouth of the bay. For whatever reason, the bigger fish just seemed to stop coming up here the way they did. Still lots of little ones. The last 5 years, if you went out and targeted flounder with jigs this big, you could catch flounder this, let me get on the screen, catch flounder this big all day long. I did a day in the chop tank the year before last where I wanted to catch flounder, and I was going to go catch flounder, and we caught a ton of flounder. Not one of them was over 10 inches long. They are there, the little ones. Hopefully, you know, we'll get a better run of bigger fish. Hard to say. That's one of those things that kind of comes and goes, you know. Any year they could come back. Next year could be the year. I got my fingers crossed. Maybe next year it'll be the year they come back, but that's just kind of the way it's been. There is some potential light at the end of the tunnel in that last season, they had a good flounder year in the Tangier and Pocomoke. And historically, that was good flounder water. But during that kind of absence in the Middle Bay zone, it was not. They were not having a whole lot of flounder down there. So last year was a big step up. It was a big bump for them. So hopefully maybe we'll come a little farther up this year. We'll see. And here we go to Ocean City. Perfect timing. So you can see the Route 50 bridge right there. In fact, you can even kind of see how there are channels and shoals accessible from the bridge there. Oh, one thing I want to mention. I forgot the gentleman's name who asked the question about shoreline fishing. But whoever you are, specifically, if you fish the Route 50 bridge for flounder, get a bridge net.
So that's Chris Sanders, and Chris let us know that he's actually watching from Jacksonville, Florida.
Oh my!
So I don't know if he's going to be fishing the Route 50 bridge, but I hope we did give him some good advice.
Well, you know, this would go. I would say this for anybody fishing any bridge more than 5 feet tall for flounder. When you got to reel them up through the air, like, it's a guarantee. The bigger the fish, the better the guarantee. It's going to fall off. You get the bridge net. They're just these big hoop nets, and you put a weight in the bottom, and you just tie a rope to it, and you lower it down and put it just below the surface of the water. And then when you reel your flounder up, you just kind of maneuver him with your rod tip, swing him into the net, and then grab the rope and pick it up real quick, and you can haul the fish up. It saves a lot of lost fish.
That's a fantastic idea. I like that.
Yeah. So, okay. So here we are in OC, right? You can see the bridge. I put the red stars to the channel that runs on the west side. It's commonly, this whole area there where that channel is commonly called the thoroughfare. If you talk to someone from OC, from OC, they'll call it the thoroughfare. It's spelled thoroughfare. I don't know which is the right pronunciation, but that's what it is. That's probably the best known Ocean City flounder zone. And you have, good channel, strong current, and you have shoal. So you kind of have everything to work with there throughout the tidal cycle. It is all good zone. I would encourage going there. But I would also say you can see in this shot, it's not the only channel. The channels also go up along the east side. They cut behind some shoals up close to the barrier island. They cut back on the west side, back towards the bridge. All those, anywhere you've got the channels and the shoals, the combination that gives you the option to work both during different tidal cycles is a likely good area. So you want to work, any of those areas. Personally, if I were going to Ocean City tomorrow, where would I start? I would probably start at the thoroughfare. If there were 10 boats there, I would immediately leave because I'd rather fish by myself. I don't want to deal with all the traffic. And I would head for one of these other spots. In the middle of the summer, June, July, August, I would never go to the thoroughfare. Never do it. No way. There's going to be like 1,500 boats floating in every direction, trying to catch a flounder. And on top of that, there will be guys blasting through there at 50 miles an hour. It's total chaos. Waves, people, it's nutty back there in the summertime. So other than April, I would immediately start elsewhere. Don't forget that first picture we started with behind Assateague. Any of the channel behind Assateague honestly can hold fish. Off the airport there is kind of a known hotspot. It does tend to kind of be better than a lot of the other areas. But even back there during the height of summer, you're going to find a bunch of boats. Right now, there's probably nobody back there. And that's why April flounder fishing in Ocean City, if you ask me, that's the best time to do it. Late April, early May, absolute best time to do it. Waterpreak, April, Chincoteague, Quimby, you're not going to have the same level of competition. It's not going to be quite so cramped, and it won't be quite such a big deal trying to get away from boats. And they're during the summer too. Usually, prime time. They hold the tournaments in Waterpreak. It's a madhouse then. But where these red stars are, July and August, if you want peace and quiet, don't even dream of going there. All right, Chris, we got one more slide. So here you see, this is again the 5-inch Berkeley Gulp Jerk Shad. You see it's chartreuse again. I will use white. Sometimes white is better. If I'm targeting flounder, this is always what I'm starting with, and I might change that tail to a white. That's pretty much it. And people, if you've listened to me talk fishing before, you'll often hear me say, try different stuff, whatever. It's very rare that I'll say, this is what I use, and I don't change much. But in this particular case, that's what I use. But I got to point that way on this computer screen. That's what I use when I'm going for flounder, and I don't change very much. Again, I'm talking coastal bays and also in the Chesapeake. I'm not talking at the offshore reef and wreck sites. At those sites, I absolutely do switch over to a double rig, top and bottom, fluke killer, and put the swimming mullet on that rig. That just outfishes the jig. Honestly, when you get to those offshore wrecks, 60, 70, 80 feet of water, it's really just too deep to jig a jig like this. That's the main issue. You can't reach and hold bottom effectively. You got to be able to put on 5-6 ounces of lead, and to do that, you got to use that fluke killer. But in the bays, that's the ticket. I'm going to see if I can do it right. Nope. I can't even. Man, the computer's confusing. This is so confusing. There it is. That's the one. All right, Chris. Do we have any questions though?
No.
No questions.
We could sit here and wait for a little bit. I'm sure someone's got a question.
Well, we'll give them a second to pop in there. In the meantime, I'm going to tell you folks, if you have the least little inkling to learn how to go shad fishing and try it out, like I said at the very beginning, before we got cut off, unfortunately, the shad in the Potomac are in absolutely prime form right now. We went to Fletcher's. We walked north, fished off the rocks. I don't know, 300 yards up from Fletcher's, 500 yards up. It was just utterly fantastic. I would say every third cast you caught a fish, and it was just as much as you wanted. Silver spoons were the prime offering. We were fishing tandem rigs with a shad dart forward, silver spoon in the back. Silver spoon they hit most of the time. I also had a little chartreuse spoon, and I tried throwing that, and that was highly effective. Split shot about 2 feet up the line to weight it down, 10 to 12 count to let it sink, and then a slow retreat back, and they were just slamming it. It was great. And not a fishery I participate in much. I have years ago, but not much lately, because honestly, I just didn't want to beat up those fish. But the shad run's been good lately, and so we went to give it a try, and it was very cool. It was very cool. Reports from the Rappahannock and the James are also good right now. The Susquehanna, the reports are early. They're just starting. So that'll be better in another week or two, which is common. Normally, the southern rivers start first. The northern areas are a week or two behind them.
Well, we got nothing, Lenny.
All right. Well,
and I think we might have some more technical difficulties going on. I checked my phone just to see us live on Facebook, and it's not loading our page. So,
oh my goodness,
I'm gonna have to call, Mr. Sternberg again.
We'll have to figure it out.
Here, hold on. We got a question from Chesapeake Hunter.
A YouTube viewer.
They're all YouTube viewers. They are.
Well, there you go. Yeah, we lost Facebook.
All right. Well, hold on. Let's Chesapeake Hunter. Recently moved down here. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure where down here is, but I suspect you might be near Ocean City, because the back bay fishing in that area is very tough during the summer. It can be good. The biggest problem really is the crowds. You see how many boats float through those channels trying to catch a flounder, and you have to wonder to yourself, how in God's name can a flounder swim into the inlet in Ocean City and last more than 15 minutes? Because there's like 8,000 baits in every direction. There's a lot of other fishing that is really good, that is really cool, that you can get into. The inlet will hold fish. There's rockfish spring, fall around the bridges. Some years croaker move in good numbers. You kind of never know. You go down Assateague Way, get away from the crowds, and you start getting much better fishing.
Cool. Actually, we've got quite a few questions popping up now, all via YouTube.
So Hampton Roads, so that's a totally different ball game, because you got deep water, strong current. A lot of the guys down there swear by slow trolling. They love the slow troll. Some of them jig when you get out of the deep current. Deep water, high current areas. They'll throw jigs. Our Hampton correspondent, Chuck Harrison, who's been fishing down there his entire life, he's big on doing exactly what I was talking about with the jigs. But he stays away from the CBBT when he's doing that, and does that more in the, channel edges, shoals, up the bay a little bit, inside the mouth. I think he also fishes around the islands a lot doing that, but I'm sure he stays out of that. You get some whopping currents right through there that can, make it hard to do what we've been talking about. But again, if you switch to the top and bottom fluke killer rig and use the swimming mullet on there, that allows you to hold bottom in that and really work those areas really well. Now, Scott, we have not been getting flounder reports from that zone as of yet. I'm sure there's some down there. I'm sure a few have been caught, but not enough that they've really kind of made their way into the fishing reports yet. That'll change, of course. But man, I envy you guys for the redfish bite you've been having. It's been an incredible early spring red bite. Lynn Haven, Sandbridge, mouth of the Elizabeth have all been really good spots for reds already. So, whew, man, that's something that's hard to complain about.
And so, Lenny, I know you. I think you answered this already, but I just want to make sure.
Well, the Potomac's a little wacky. So you can have a Maryland license, you can have a Virginia license, but if you go above the, I'm not sure if it's the official Washington, D.C. line or if they use the bridge. Now I'm blanking on the name of the bridge. Maybe someone will jump in and, is it the Woodrow Wilson Bridge? I think it's the Beltway Bridge. When you get above the bridge, then you actually need a Washington, D.C. license. So if you get that far up the Potomac, you got to shift gears. Like if you're a Fletcher's fishing for shad, you need a Washington, D.C. license, not a Maryland, not a Virginia.
All right. Well, there you go. Christopher, where's the Eastern Shore perch?
So there's still some whites happening. The perch run is pretty much a done deal. Yellows are basically done. The whites, I think, have peaked. There's still some being caught. I went out last Sunday on the western side and had a good day, but it was kind of your standard tail end of the run deal where you caught like 10 little tiny males and then you caught a nice fish. And then 10 little tiny males and you caught a nice fish. We ended up, we probably caught, I don't know, there were 3 of us fishing. We probably caught 60 fish, something like that. Who knows? And we took home 8. And that's kind of the ratio that you're looking at right now. The Eastern Shore is probably a little bit ahead of the western side. It normally is. It normally gets a little warmer, a little faster. So it's probably even a little farther down the trail. Now, the western side salt pond perch runs are just getting started. Last weekend was the first weekend that I heard of decent catches coming from the salt ponds. They're a little bit of a different story. Their run's a little later. I don't know why. But those ponds that don't really have much flow, Triton is the one near me. It's the one I run over to. If I wasn't sitting here right now, I might be standing on the bank of that pond right now casting for the white perch. But they too do tend to be, a couple weeks behind. And they do tend to be all whites, no yellows. And like I say, last weekend was the first I heard of them. One thing I'll add to that, it's been a grass shrimp game. It's all about the grass shrimp right now. Using the minnows is a done deal. You want to use a grass shrimp. What I've found best recently is putting it behind a shad dart and just bouncing it along the bottom, real slowly, just little hops right off the bottom.
All right, very good. Got another question for the Tangier.
That goes both ways. Generally, as a rule of thumb, I've always had better luck on them working deeper waters. I've caught some, actually, a lot of times by accident, fishing for trout, fishing for specks. If you fish for specks casting up to the shallows, you will catch flounder now and again. But it's normally kind of an accidental catch. Targeting them, I've generally found deeper water, sharper channels. Kedges Straits, I've always found good for them. Off the mouth of the Anamessics, I don't know the name of the light. There, right off of Chrisfield, there's a light out there, real sheer drop-offs around it. That historically, for me, has been a really good flounder spot. Generally deeper, but you do catch them in the shallows too. It does absolutely happen.
Cool. While we're talking about the Tangier, another question about kayak fishing.
Oh, so what's the best month to fish the Tangier Sound? Joe, I don't believe there's a solid, honest answer to that. I really don't. Early on, late April, early May is going to be the best time if you want to target gator trout. I mean, really big trout. You won't get big numbers, but that's when you get the biggest ones. Later on, then you start getting better numbers of trout. May, June, good numbers of trout. Once July hits, hopefully you have reds in the mix. Let me back up. Throughout this, you're going to have stripers mixed in the shallows. you kind of always seem to get stripers in the shallows in the Tangier. Midsummer, it gets tougher. Midsummer is not better in the shallows, I don't think. You still get specks. Gets a little tougher to find a bigger variety of species. Excuse me. Once you get into the fall, generally you get more stripers. The striper bite picks up in the shallows. You still get your specks. Often you can get good reds. I forgot to say, early on you also get some bigger reds. They're generally above slot fish, and then they disappear and the slot fish move in. But it depends on what you want to fish for. It really does. There's no single solid answer, and it also changes season by season. Personally, if I was planning a trip there, I guess I would look to either May or early June to get kind of the best mix, the best diversity, and not be spectacularly hot yet. Kind of the baking hot conditions, and perhaps late September, early October. You can have really good fishing midsummer. I tell you, the problem with the Tangier Sound midsummer, and I don't think anybody's going to argue with me on this, the problem in midsummer is the dang bugs. You can have some atrocious bug attacks midsummer, particularly at dusk. It can be vicious. Mosquitoes and the biting flies. Whoo! I'll tell you what. I went to Costa Rica one time, and everybody said, "Oh, bring the bug repellent, bring bug repellent. You'll really regret it if you don't bring bug repellent." And I got down there, and I was like, "You Costa Rican people have never been to the Tangier Sound in August." That's I'll tell you what. The bugs are a lot worse than they are in Costa Rica.
Wow. But, they don't live in our toilets here like they do in Costa Rica.
Yeah, they really get you. Those black gnats, those biting gnats, the no-see-ums. Oh, man. They will. I have tied my boat off at the boat ramp and then gone to the truck to back the trailer down and sat there in the truck, like trying to clean myself off, and not like I didn't want to go pull the boat. It was that bad. I didn't want to get out of the truck again.
Wow. All right, fishing vessel Miss Paula is talking about the smaller flounder that you're talking about. Where do they go?
Seen a ton of the pots around Sandy Point. That doesn't surprise me. You know what? Honest answer, I don't know where they go. I don't know if they migrate out. I honestly don't know. I haven't targeted them year round. Like I say, in recent years when I've focused on flounder, that's kind of all I've found. And I've gone out like bound and determined to catch some good flounder, and then I spent half a day catching flounder this big, and I'm like, okay, that's it. I don't know where they go. I got no clue. Sorry. But there are lots of them around. I wish they would like grow up and come back, but that's not happening because, they were there 6-8 years ago when the bigger flounder started to disappear. You could still go catch those little tiny guys. So I don't know. I don't know what the deal is.
Well, good, honest answer. I don't know. Last question. Is Chrisfield a good flounder area?
Yeah, absolutely. That like I was saying, right at the mouth of the Anamessex River, there's that light. There's a real sharp drop. I don't remember the name of it. But if you look at the charts, you'll see it. Real good stuff. All those areas. And again, historically, they were very good areas for flounder. They were not great for flounder for the last decade or so. But last year, the bite was a lot better in those zones. Hopefully this year, it'll be good again. Hopefully they'll keep heading north, and we'll get a decent bite. I can remember a time, it wasn't that long ago. I'm going to say, it was probably 10 years ago, 12 years ago. During the summertime, we honestly did not target rockfish. We really didn't do it. We would go flounder fishing, and prior to that, go trout fishing. And you could catch your limit, fishing Thomas Point, Eastern Bay, the edges off of Poplar, even farther north, Mattapeake, all those areas. You could go and target flounder and catch them. You catch your limit. And, again, you go back a little farther, we would go trout fishing. You catch your weak fish, catch your limit. And back then it was 8 a day. And it was no problem. And throughout that entire period, we would also catch limits of rockfish, but by accident. You jig that jig on the bottom for flounder. Every now and again, you catch a rockfish. and you were only allowed 2, so you catch your 2 rockfish. You know, it's changed a lot. Concerned about taking my 22 Grady down and grounding. Would it be better to rent a flat bottom boat? Honest answer, Matt, 22 is like about as big as you really want down there. Like that's kind of a big boat for those waters. I'm talking Watchaprig now, Watchaprig, Chincoteague, Quimby. The ramps there are, they're okay for a 22, might get kind of marginal. I would be concerned about it too. I have a 22 Glacier Bay. I don't think I would launch it there. It's a little much for those waters. You can rent boats there at Watchaprig. What you give up by doing that is you're not going to have a fish finder. You're not going to have all your gear that's on your boat. You got to make sure you grab everything. Grab your net, right? You know, you're going to have to grab a cooler, all that stuff that normally you might have on your own boat, you're not going to have. Tackle box. I got all my tackle built into my boat now. If I go on someone else's boat or I go on a rental boat, I'm like, oh, I got to make a tackle box. So you got to worry about all that stuff. But I mean, if I was going down, I got a little crabbing skiff. If I was going down there, I would take my crabbing skiff as opposed to the Glacier Bay. It's a 16-footer. That's plenty of boat for those waters. And yeah, I'd be concerned about it too, honestly. I'm not saying don't do it. I mean, you can do it. Go slow, be careful. Might be a little bit of a hassle launching on certain tides. A little dicey.
Nice. Okay, Larry's got a question about what you're talking about with the chop tank.
Mouth of the chop tank, you're talking east? I'm sure he meant Sharp Silent Light or further upstream. Well, on the chop tank, east of Sharp Silent Light is heading upstream, right? So if you go up, if you look at a chart and you see Cook Point, if you go out from Cook Point, you'll see a marker where it drops off into the channel. That right there was always a spectacular flounder spot for me. I've caught them off Sharp Silent. I've caught them at the Stone Rock. I don't recall ever really targeting them there. I don't recall coming across them in big numbers there. But up off of Cook Point was always just a spectacular spot. Years ago, we used to go to the airplane wreck and catch them there. I'm going way back now. That was probably 15, 18 years ago. I haven't done that in a long time. But that edge off of Cook, that's where, the last time I went up there, just a couple years ago, and I said, I'm going to catch a flounder, we did catch lots and lots of flounder there. They were just all really small.
Right. All right, Lenny, I think we've run out of questions and time.
All right. Well, did we start getting questions from Facebook people instead of?
It started to come back.
I wonder if it bounced in and out there. Folks, you have our apologies. It kind of stinks. It's sort of out of our control. I know that's like a cop-out, but it is what it is.
It is what it is. But, we still got plenty of people through both channels. So
good.
Yeah. Anyhow, with that being said, I think we'll get out of here. But before we leave, big thank you to Suzuki for sponsoring this episode of Live with Lenny. And we'll be back in one more month with another.
All right. See you next time.
Live with Lenny. All right, guys.